Last night, while President Obama made new policy, former Governor Sarah Palin made a brand new pretzel. In our third story on the countdown, Palin was reacting to a comment the president made about the cost of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. And through her particular pretzel of logic, she actually claimed he was demonizing the victims of 9/11. Palin, of death panel infamy, again used her Facebook page as war room, quoting, "Finally, President Obama delivered an offhand applause line tonight about the cost of the war on terror. As we approach the anniversary of the September 11th attacks and honor those who died that day and those who have died since in the war on terror, in order to secure our freedoms, we need to remember their sacrifices and not demonize them as having had too high a price tag." What the president actually said was this: add it all up, and the plan I'm proposing will cost around $900 billion over 10 years, less than we have spent on the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, and less than the tax cuts for the wealthiest few Americans that Congress passed at the beginning of the previous administration. First of all, complaints about the cost of the wars began years before this president took office. Those complaints have emanated from both parties and have never been intended to impugn the troops, much less the victims of the 9/11 attacks. And 9/11 had, as has been proved repeatedly in small words suitable for people like Mrs. Palin, nothing to do with the war in Iraq. But Mrs. Palin has not only managed to connect those unconnectable dots, she also used 9/11 to attack the president. Let's turn now to the Washington editor of The Nation, Chris Hayes. Chris, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
It's hard to ask a serious question about this kind of logic because it is so incredibly off. Is this just?
It is.
Is this just another dog whistle? Is this just another, dart thrown against the wall in the attempt to delegitimize a president?
Well, yes, I mean, it is, but it's also sort of part of it's real bedrock kind of right-wing rhetoric. They've been saying this for 40, 50 years. I mean, the notion is anytime anyone tries to question the size of the American national security state, the amount of wars we're involved in, the amount of bases we have overseas, the expenditures related thereto, then they are impugning the troops, and I guess in this case, in a particularly creative flourish, impugning the victims of 9/11, and that's something that the right wing has been basically trying to argue for 4 decades.
When there are presumably at least a few Republicans left who might want to use actual policy points to differ with the president, to argue against his proposals, does a Palin do a disservice to herself and to those Republicans when she goes this far out on the logical limb?
Well, yes. I mean, yes, in the sense of she does a disservice to the state of a vibrant opposition that can actually substantively contribute to the American process of self-governance. But I don't think in the political short term she does, because again, the audience for all this is a relatively small and very ideologically extreme portion of the populace that's going to be, basically voting in the Iowa caucuses in 2012, and that as a sort of sample of public opinion is just incredibly different than the American people as a whole. And so I think everything, if you kind of refract it through that lens, it may make perfectly fine short-term political sense to do this kind of grandstanding. And yet here is Senator McCain, who got a shout-out, basically a surprise, no doubt, from the president last night in that speech, and full credit for one of the ideas the president adopted for his reform, and his vice presidential candidate, Ms. Palin, now complaining that the president disproved the death panel crap. Limbaugh now applauding Palin, saying, "You call us out, we're going to hit back twice as hard." We've touched on this previously tonight, but is not part of the dynamic here to be as loud as possible, and truth and accuracy are really irrelevant to the equation? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, at this point it is destroy this bill specifically, destroy health reform specifically, destroy the president broadly, politically, by any means necessary. I mean, I think that, I actually witnessed, very interestingly, when the original kind of murmurs of death panel came up, there were some conservatives who were like, that's a little too far. And next thing you know, Chuck Grassley is repeating it at town halls because, it embedded itself in people's consciousness and then thought, hey, this weapon is lying around, I might as well use it. Right? So, yes, I don't think that the rhetorical posture that the right has adopted towards health care reform or the president has anything to do with the substance of the charges they're making. And there are substantive charges one could make. That's what's so crazy. You can attack the actual bills that are presented from a conservative perspective. There's perfectly legitimate conservative attacks to be made. They're just not actually being made. Yeah, but that takes work. Chris Hayes of The Nation, as always. Great thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Keith.